A little bit about myself. So I'm from the UK, grew up in Norfolk, and I went to university to study something completely different. I studied biology. I can tell you now, having worked in events ever since, that events is far more fun than the traditional subjects out there. So in terms of whether our industry has a bright future, I think just by the nature that it's so interesting to study means that it will be guaranteed, I think, for many decades to come. So whilst I was at university, I joined the student radio station, so that's how I first got into events. Enjoyed doing my own little radio show. I think had about 5 listeners, including my mum, so that was all good practice. And then I joined the committee and really got my teeth into it when we bid for the National Student Radio Conference, hosted radio stations from around the UK, and put on a 3-day event, a little bit like this. After that, I met a chap called Paul Barton, who was from Backstage Academy up in West Yorkshire. And I was interested in education because I'd worked a bit for the Students' Union and led that for a year after graduating. And I moved up in a role as Student Services Officer. So I was there for the student support, and I'm now in the current role of Operations Director, where we've got the academics who teach the core subjects, we've got the commercial team who bring in the students, who bring in the sponsorship deals, and also operations with the glue that holds it all together. So the administration from timetabling, all the boring stuff really, right through until the industry placements as well. I'd just like to say at this point as well, a huge thank you to Freddie, the legend himself. I've had the privilege of meeting Freddie over the last 3 years or so when he's visited Backstage Academy. And he's always been very generous in his support of us, and I'm very pleased to be here representing Backstage in South Africa. There's been a few speakers attending over the last few years, so what I'm going to do today is keep the introduction to Backstage reasonably short. Some of you who have attended in previous years might know a little bit about it. But then after that, I'd want to focus particularly on why, as industry partners, should you support education. I think some of the benefits that students see from industry partnerships are quite clear, but actually I want to just explore a little bit from the other side of the table and do a few case studies as to what we see in the UK. How's the presentation going? Don't worry, this happens at open day sometimes as well, so I've learnt gradually over the years how to film. Do you want to do plan B with the USB? Is that? Yeah. Okay, always good to have a plan B, which we fleshed out before the show.
So what's your plan B?
So plan B is the mighty USB. So we talk about the 4th Industrial Revolution. I think we're still in the 3rd. It's always good, even if you've got the high-tech stuff, the artificial intelligence, all appearing to be working, actually a good old USB in your pocket is best. Just to sort of touch on some of the questions that were asked from our previous speakers, especially the doc that's just been, and me at the beginning of today. One thing in particular, with young people, is there a fear perhaps that with the impact of technology that we're just going to be glued to our phones constantly? And, UK, South Africa, both the same. Phones are a huge part of our life, but what we've seen actually is that the events sector is probably one of the last remaining sectors that is still staying strong, because people still want that live experience, being able to touch and feel and have that emotion that you just don't get through a smartphone. So I think I've got a message of hope as well, is that the future is positive. So don't despair, I think, with the young generation. I think that the opportunities will keep coming through. Excellent, so plan B is up and running. So, as I mentioned, I'm just going to introduce Backstage Academy briefly, and then talk about industry partnerships that we have, and use a bit of case studies to give some evidence. So you can see one of our studios there at Backstage, and we teach degrees for the live event sector. So we have courses based here up in Wakefield, West Yorkshire. I grew up in the middle of the country, so the left-hand picture is where I want to be spending most of my time. But Wakefield, you can see on the right-hand side, we're based in an old mining village, so in the UK it's quite a poor area. And it's really good to be putting something back into our local community. So our courses, we run live events production, so that is a bit of a generalist course like the previous speakers were mentioning. So we teach the lighting, the sound, the live visuals, but then we move on to the management side, because quite often someone might want to start their career as a lighting designer, but then move into the management later on. So I think it's important to have that real blend of skills and experience. We teach live visual design and production, which is really quite a niche and specialist field, even within live events. So effectively, that's based around projection mapping. So I don't know if any of you saw any of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee celebrations back in London. Buckingham Palace was projected onto, and it's when the building appears to be falling down. I'm not sure how far globally that may well exist in the events that you have here as well. And it's a really sort of in-demand sector, so our students are already earning about sort of £450 a day, far more than I earn. So it really is a niche field that's expanding all the time. We also run a stage and production management degree, so that very much looks more at management theories and how to get the best out of people. Because I think it's often easy to focus on the production side, but like Neil was saying earlier, the people, the soft side of the events business is just as important, because everything might be working perfectly well with the tech, but if there's something wrong with the directions to the site, if there's an emergency, you need to have all of those plans in place, as you well know. So why is Backstage Academy different in the UK? So mainly this is because we were born out of collaboration with industry, and Production Park, which is our parent company, is the primary home for live events within the UK. I think you have similar companies in South Africa, but Production Park has various different arms, such as the big studio space. So we have artists and bands from around the world that come and rehearse in these studios. Normally spend about a week in the space. The artist will perhaps fly in on the final day, and then they'll go off on their world tour around the globe. We also have a stage and set construction arm called Brilliant. And you can see here one of our jobs from earlier in the year, the Sam Smith World Tour. This is one of my favourite ones, I think, just because of the simplicity of the set that's here. There's not sort of big flashing visuals, it's all just about the lines and that sort of creative form. We were privileged to have a sort of private dress rehearsal in the studio space from Sam Smith before he went, which was quite surreal, as there was only about 50 of us in the audience, as he was singing sort of almost a duet to us. But it's fascinating, the amount of productions that come through the space, and we've got a wall of fame up on the studio, and it really is sort of anyone and everyone. It does pose some logistical constraints for Backstage Academy, because we're the education part, and often you'll get the artists come in and take precedence. So, as a timetabler for student lessons, they had one case last year where we had a student group, about 6 of them, and I have to say I'm really sorry, but your assessment that's on Friday, unfortunately Beyonce needs the space. And that they were fine with it, because ultimately they knew themselves, Beyonce, she is the queen, so Beyonce won. As you can see from the vast stage and set, we can use our studios to the full capacity to really create some quite special moments for the live audiences. So that brings me on to the main sort of point of my presentation, is the importance of industry partnerships between education and the sector. So you can see there, hot off the press, this was our student major project yesterday it was, and this was a culmination of their 3 years on the degree course, and you had students that were production managing, stage managing, right down to the lighting designers, the visual effects, the sound. It was completely put on by the students for the other students. And all of the kit that you can see up there just wouldn't be possible without the generous support of our industry partners. And that's right from the equipment. So you can see there from Row Visual, it practically quadrupled our stock of video wall that we just wouldn't be able to put on an event like that without them. So the equipment is there. We have guest lecturers come in from the industry because, as you know, it's such a fast-changing sector that if we have a lecturer in place that's been with us for 3 years, unless they're out there constantly getting up-to-date skills, we're not able to teach the students the latest stuff. So we've got the guest lecturers coming in, and then finally we have the students going out on placements. So it's been touched on briefly over the last couple of days, but I think that's the most valuable aspect of any education, is the ability to actually do it. It's one thing to learn the theory, but you've got to be able to apply it to be able to learn and to build your skills. So we've had students going on a range of placements around the UK, so Glastonbury Festival, Gron Concert in Denmark, which is a festival that effectively changes its location to a different city every single day, and all put on for charity. So huge experience for them, getting to build the stage, getting to shadow the different departments, and again, due to fantastic industry partners. So, little snapshot here of our graduation. So after all those 3 years of being out in the industry and then coming back to learn the theory, they put it all together in one big event, which is for their final students going off into the industry and their jobs. And you can see here we get to use the facilities at Production Park to really put on quite a special moment for both students and for the families that support them. Probably the most important thing to consider as well is that I think when you're in education, you don't have to cease all work in industry. And I know it's something that was discussed yesterday. And it can be an important consideration, especially when you need to pay the bills and to be able to live, as to how do you keep those jobs running. And I think what's important is that one doesn't have to exclude the other. So with the placements, some of them are voluntary. If they're studying a world-renowned lighting designer, that's just a great opportunity that people will just do it for free. But a lot of the work at festivals will be paid, and it's important for the students just to keep up that constant practice in the industry. So that's the benefit to our students, but as I said at the beginning, I want to try and explore why industry partners should partner with education institutions, because I know both in the UK, here in Africa as well, there's sometimes not the connection, and sometimes we mentioned the siloed working. It's a global phenomenon. It's not something that's unique to here or to the UK, but it's important that we work together, and I want just to go through some of the benefits of that. So the key one, really, in my mind, is the fact that regardless of who the students are that might be doing an opportunity with you, effectively they are your future workforce. They might not be so immediately, they might come to you in 10 years, maybe 20 years, but ultimately, as an industry sponsor, you're putting in to the wider sector something that you will eventually get the rewards from. And whether that's from direct employment, or it could even be through consultancy later on, you will get the benefits in due course. One of the case studies that I want to touch on is Scott from Backstage Academy. He was a student about 3 years ago, and he's now actually joined our own company. He's now the studio manager. So that big studio you saw at the beginning, he started life off as a student, and that's now part of our future workforce. We're nurturing the talent to be able to go out, and one day as well he'll probably fledge into the industry and be with tours around the world. Second, Ibiza Rocks, so in the Mediterranean. Some of our students there every year go out to work on the show. So effectively it's a big hotel in Ibiza, and they are the production crew for the different events that are happening. So we've had students that were out there 3-4 years ago that are now coming back with the company to recruit more students. Again, we're just supplying the industry, and for Ibiza Rocks themselves, they're getting a stream of good talent coming through the system that've got that theory knowledge and the skills, and they can see them working in real life. Number 2, developing your brand awareness. So for kit manufacturers supplying kit to education institutions, you get to promote your wares. So a case study for us is the Green Hippo Media Service. So what we've done over the last year or so with our visual course is run intensive weeks where the industry partners come in and the students are set a challenge, a bit like Top Gear, with an envelope's given at the beginning of the week, and they have to create and meet the brief. And for the industry partner, it's great because those students are really getting to know their product, so that when they go out into the industry, even though they've been generous in that moment, they will then be aware of the product and in positions of power one day be able to promote that company. So it's all about the soft sort of market awareness, which we find sort of companies really buy into. So some more subtle ones, research and development. One example I'm going to use for this is Notch, again used by our Live Visuals course, and this is a content creation software that has really sort of taken off in Europe in the last 2 to 3 years. And we've had students that have, both with this software and previous ones, in their second year, so not even graduating students, have actually gone down to the company, had an internship, and helped to write some of the manuals and user guides for these programs. So often with a young mind in particular, nice and fluid, not set in their ways, and what that brings is the ability to just think outside the box a bit. So there's a lot of potential there by inviting students in to work and to help develop your products. You can actually sort of take it in novel directions that you might not have considered before. And finally, a big one really is actual project delivery. So again, just because you're a student currently working towards a degree, doesn't mean that you're not an industry practitioner already. And what we've seen with our students is they actually get to work on real-life commercial projects. So one in particular, which took place about 3 years ago, was some of our visual effects students worked with the Singleton whiskey brand and flew out to Taiwan, and effectively they projection mapped a map of Scotland and told the history of the brand of whiskey to help that company pitch to the Asian market, which they hadn't previously been able to do. So often when we think of events, we think of big rock concerts, touring sort of events throughout the globe, but actually micro events are just as important a way of bringing in income. And the visual sector in particular, we really see that happen. So some of our students as well have gone as far as Kazakhstan, Chicago, all across the world, sometimes with their lecturers as well, to actually work on those live projects. So do, if you are sort of an industry company, for all of those 4 different reasons there, actually working with providers, so such as Backstage in the UK, but such as Sarah here in South Africa, that collaboration and partnership can really reap the rewards for you, and not just for the students that are working there. So finally then, just in terms of looking to the future, it's been a really interesting conference for me just to see some of the different issues that have been presented. And like I said at the beginning, I'd just like to reassure everyone and provide hope that the issues discussed here aren't just discussed here. They're just, in Europe, we have the same problems. So silo working in particular, it's human nature to hug things close and to keep what you designed and your job secure. And it's really just a challenge and to try and let go and to try and be collaborative. And it has been a theme really over the last 2 days, both within Africa but also I think around the globe, to try and harness the benefits of partnership working. I think it's an optimistic future. I know as well some of the discussion around the 4th Industrial Revolution. That's actually quite a new concept for me. I don't know whether it's in Europe in general or the UK, but we're aware of a lot of the subcomponents like artificial intelligence, and we're trying to think of those problems. How do we how do we solve them in the events environment? But I think perhaps when you look at them together and put them all together as the Industrial Revolution, it can actually seem a little bit more scary because it's change coming en masse. So that's just something that I've been thinking about this morning, perhaps to give a little bit of hope, and is to try and break it down into different components. And then the challenge of adapting seems a lot less daunting than if it's just one big thing. So those are my two take-home messages, really. Collaboration, to really try and pull together, and it's something that I am going to take home as well to the UK, trying to collaborate more, especially like speaking to Nee last night about the Ghanaian College. But also, again, the future is bright. I think there's a lot to be proud of in our industry, and to really harness the opportunity that the global live events industry can offer us. Thank you very much for listening.